Hello and welcome to Shannon Gardens. Thank you guys so much for joining me. So in part 2 of last week's video, I'm now going to be adding in some perennials into my perennial garden. If you guys tuned into last week's video, then you'll know that I've really been struggling this year with deer, and they have wiped out my dependable perennials that I absolutely love and have really just taken away a lot of color from the garden this year. So I want to add some plants and color back in while keeping the deer in mind. Now, I did put up a deer fence, and I use that term loosely because it was not professionally done by any means, but it is doing the job. And I have perennials that just in the last week putting that deer fence up, these perennials are returning and starting to bloom. And I'm actually shocked at how quickly it's happening, but I'm so excited and happy about it. Now, if you guys want to take a look at last week's video so you can see how the garden was looking last week and what plants have been affected, then I'll make sure to put a link to that video at the end of this video so you guys can check out part 1 of this little 2-part series that I'm doing. So I thought I'd start the video just by sharing with you guys the plants I am adding today and some information about them. All of these are perennials, some of which I've planted before, and then one I believe is brand new to me. It's the first time that I've planted it. So I'll share all that with you guys, and then I'll get to planting and show you the end result. All right, you guys, so with that, let's get to it. Okay, so the first perennial that I'm adding back into the garden is the Stella d'Oro daylily. Now, you guys have probably seen these. These are very common, and with good reason. They're very hardy. They can handle a lot of different types of soil, so they're just extremely hardy and drought tolerant, and they are a variety that's made to be more deer resistant than a lot of the other varieties of lilies, which is great and really something that I was trying to keep my eye out for the most part when I'm adding these flowers back into the garden. So I've got this one here. Now, this is hardy to USDA zones 3 through 10, and it blooms spring, summer, and into fall, and is just a very reliable plant. So I'm very excited. I'm actually adding 2 of these into the perennial garden. Now, these like well-draining, moist soil, but they don't like soggy soil. They prefer full sun, but they can tolerate some late afternoon shade, especially in hotter climates. I'm in Georgia in zone 7B, 8A, and so it will get a little bit of late afternoon shade where I'm putting it in my garden, and it attracts butterflies and hummingbirds. So just a great all-around low maintenance plant. Okay, so next we have coneflower or echinacea, and I've got a few different varieties that I've been collecting, and these are great perennials. They are noted as deer resistant. Now, unfortunately, they are not rabbit resistant, particularly when they're just putting out their new leaves and everything. So that's something to keep in mind that I wanted to mention. It's noted that the rabbits do tend to like them, but deer, for the most part, will stay away from them. Of course, if deer are hungry enough, they're going to eat whatever comes in their path. So it really just depends on how hungry they are. But nonetheless, I did want to mention that I am planting the coneflower, and these are just wonderful perennials. They are very hardy. They're tolerant of a lot of different soils. They like full sun. They attract bees, butterflies, and other pollinators and songbirds like the goldfinch, which I absolutely love goldfinch and love attracting them to my garden. I actually have some video from last week of a couple goldfinch on my thistle feeder, which I'll include here as well, just so you guys can see. But these flowers do attract those lovely songbirds. So I love having these in the garden. And there's just a lot of different varieties and colors that you can get of the coneflower. These prefer full sun. They also bloom summer to frost, and they are drought resistant. So just a great all-around plant. I'm very excited to add them to my garden. And I'll tell you guys, I got a couple of different varieties, as I mentioned. This one is Artisan Red Ombre, and you can see that beautiful color here. And then we have the Summer Magic Hot Pink. Just look at that. That is absolutely beautiful. That one might be my favorite. But then we also have the Cheyenne Spirit, which can turn anywhere from yellow to orange. I'll show you guys the tag here. And then I actually have 2 examples of the plant in its different stages of different colors. So we've got that color there. And then I have more of a yellow color here, which you guys can see this has gotten eaten up a little bit. Some of these I've had for several weeks and put them to the side because I wasn't quite ready to plant them until I put up that deer fence, but they'll rebound. They're really, really hardy, so I'm not concerned about it. And they look healthy otherwise, just the flower petals look a little damaged. So I think that's it for my coneflowers. So I've got 4 different plants here that I'm adding to the garden, and we'll move on to the next plant. Okay, so next we have Gara, also known as whirling butterflies. I've seen them as both. And look how delicate and graceful this is. It is so pretty when it's waving in the breeze. I've had this planted off and on for years. I've planted it in both containers and in the ground, and it's just done wonderfully. It's drought tolerant and heat and humidity resistant. It's deer resistant, and it can tolerate a variety of soils. So it's got these little white or pink blooms all over the plant, and they're just tiny little blooms that grow on the stem. You can get more of a dwarf variety, or you can get the larger varieties like this one is here. It can range anywhere from about 1 to 5 feet tall and 1 to 4 feet wide. And they bloom summer to fall and are good for full sun to part sun. All right, so now I'm going to move on to my next plant. Okay, so this one's a tall one. I hope you guys can see this. This is the butterfly weed. I was very excited to add this plant. This is something that I actually have had sitting around here for quite some time, but again, I was waiting until I did something about the deer before I planted it. Now, I've had this plant in the perennial garden, and I really wanted to add more of it this year to help attract the monarch butterflies, which depend on this plant. The butterfly weed is another low maintenance perennial that does well in a variety of soils, which you're going to see those words are going to pop up a lot when I'm talking, just because I do prefer things that are more low maintenance and that can handle a tougher environment. I want something that's really hardy. So this fits that bill as well. It prefers full sun and is hardy to USDA zones 3 through 9. And it also blooms in the summer, though it can take a little while to flower after you first plant it. So it may take a while to actually get itself established and start flowering. So that's something to keep in mind. It's great for monarch butterflies, and it was really on my list this year to add more flowers to the garden that would not only attract butterflies, but in particular the monarch butterflies. So I'm adding this to it, and I actually hope to continue to do that next year as well. Okay, so we'll move on to our next plant. Okay, so this next plant, I'm actually going to show you guys the tag. It's been blooming off and on since I've had it sitting to the side. You can see one bloom there where it's about to open up. It's got lots of buds here. Here's the tag of how those flowers look. So this plant is the freckle-faced Blackberry Lily, and I have looked at this plant for years. I've always thought that maybe I should get it because I have freckles, and therefore I just felt like it was a fitting plant to add into my garden, and I'm finally doing it this year. So this is a really cool plant to me. It blooms late summer, and it's hardy to USDA zones 4 through 10, and it grows 24 inches tall and 12 inches wide. Now what's cool, actually one of the things about it, is look at the fan here of the leaves, which really looks like an iris to me, the way it fans out. I just thought that was really neat that the foliage looks so nice. Now this one is also noted that it can tolerate different soil conditions. It does prefer full sun, and in fall and winter it has seed clusters that look like blackberries, hence its name. And I just thought it sounded like such a unique plant, and like I said, I've wanted to add it for years, and so I'm finally doing that. Then of course it also is noted as deer resistant, which I was happy about as well. So now I'm going to move on to my last plant that I've got, at least for today. Okay, so my last plant here is garden phlox. Again, this is one that I've had sitting to the side for quite some time. Now, I know you guys are probably thinking, why in the world are you adding garden phlox when the deer absolutely took out a lot of your garden phlox this year? And that is a good question, but honestly, garden phlox is probably one of my favorite perennials. It is one of my favorite perennials. And I was very excited to add this. I have been waiting until I got that deer fencing up, but now that my garden phlox that's already in the garden is starting to come back, I feel more comfortable in adding this. So I'm going to go ahead and add this as well. And I have a video to my top favorite perennials that I'll link at the end of this video as well, in case y'all would like to check that out. And I definitely talk about the garden phlox there and hit on some of the high notes and the things that I love about having this perennial in the garden. The garden phlox is recommended for full to part sun, and also recommended for USDA zones 4 through 8. You can get dwarf varieties, and then you can get taller varieties. They are long blooming and long lasting, and they're lovely for cut flower arrangements as well. So that's just a few of the things that I really like about these flowers. Okay, so I think that's it. I need to get busy and get these in the garden, and then I'll show you guys the end result. So I started at the base of the perennial garden here, and this soil's a lot easier to work with. It's been worked over and it's had some erosion and things like that. So the soil is actually very easy to work with. I did have to remove a couple of pretty large rocks, but otherwise it was very easy to plant in. Now, as I go further into the perennial garden, that's where I really encounter the red clay that hasn't been worked. And so I just amended with garden soil and with some mushroom compost in those areas. All right, you guys, so the planting is done and I can't wait to show you how it looks. Now you'll notice that I've grouped the coneflowers together at the base of the perennial garden, and one thing I really wanted to focus on was pulling some brighter colors and bigger flowers down into this area to be more consistent with colors I have throughout other parts of the garden. So I really focused on oranges and pinks and yellows and a little bit of red just to tie the garden together and really help this area stand out as well. Now on either side of the Sun Magic Vintage Hot Pink Coneflower that I'm showing here, I've planted the Stella d'Oro daylilies, which I have the bright orange flowers. And then behind the Artisan Red Ombre Coneflower, I've planted the freckle-faced Blackberry Lily, which I'll show a more up-close view in just a minute. Next, you'll see the Cheyenne Spirit Coneflower with the Gara planted behind it with those delicate white little flowers. And then my Cleome is beside that, which the deer don't like at all. So that's been left alone, thank goodness, and is just this enormous plant that comes back every year. So here's a closer view of the freckle-faced Blackberry Lily, and I'll show one of the blooms up close here so you can see the freckles on the flower, which I think is just so cute. And behind that is where I usually have a large patch of garden phlox that the deer actually really just took out this year. But I am starting to see some life and starting to see some flowering going on here just since putting up that deer fence a week ago. And I decided to go ahead and add the Glamour Girl pink garden phlox here with the idea of having several different colors of garden phlox in this area over time. So here's a couple of other views of the perennial garden with the Rose of Sharon blooming and then the Crocosmia blooming as well. And then the drift roses are really starting to recover from the deer, which is actually amazing to me how quickly they're recovering. And it's just such a testament to me on the hardiness of the drift roses because they're looking so much better just a week after doing that deer fence. Now here's a second patch of garden phlox that's recovering as well and blooming, and I actually ended up adding a couple of sprigs of the Glamour Girl phlox to this area, and I'm really hoping it'll take root. I've had luck doing it this way before, so we'll see how it goes, but it is so hot this time of year to be doing this, so I'm definitely going to have to be mindful of watering these sprigs as well as all the new plantings. So just behind the garden phlox and to the left of a very, very large butterfly bush is where I planted the butterfly weed, and I'm absolutely loving this orange color next to the purple of the butterfly bush and the garden phlox. It's one of my favorite color combinations, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I was so excited to share with you guys how the perennials are recouping in the garden just a week after putting up that deer fence and then adding some new perennials into the garden as well. So thank you so much for joining me again. Now please make sure to stay tuned for my upcoming video, which you can do by subscribing and clicking the notification bell so that you can be notified each time I upload a new video. All right, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful week, and until next time, happy gardening and goodbye.